listeners, to the BizBlend podcast where business, leadership, and mindset intersect. Now, listeners, today's topic and the guest is incredible for all of us. We have talked about so many different forms of leadership in the entrepreneurial context or business context. But today we are talking about self leadership. And my guest is the incredible Dr. Fredah Mainah, a self leadership coach, speaker, author, and founder of Rainbow Ono Sanctuary. Now, with decades of experience as a professor and consultant, Dr. Mainah empowers individuals and teams alike to lead from within, inside out, with clarity, courage, and purpose. So, we try to understand what exactly self leadership looks like. Why does it matter in today's chaotic, noisy world? And how exactly does it show up in our business and life? So, with that, listeners, let's quickly jump into this unique conversation. So, Dr. Fredah, welcome to the show, and I am so honored to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me today, Sana. I'm really excited to talk to your audience about self leadership. Let's first of all start with the word self. When you
Yes.
hear the word self, of course, it means me or you. And so
Mm,
when you say myself, what does that mean to you? And then leadership. When we think about leadership in organizations, we think about a boss. But when you're thinking about being the boss of yourself, what does that
mm,
really mean? Because that is what self leadership is, where you are the boss of yourself. But you're not a boss of yourself in the way we see leadership in organizations.
mhm,
Organizations are looking at outcomes, productivity, performance, making sure employees work so that they can get paid. But when
mm,
you're your own boss, you're not looking at outcomes in that way. You're looking at outcomes that will influence the way you live your life in the desired lifestyle that you want. So some people might follow what we call the wheel of life, where
mhm,
you're looking at different aspects of your own life. But before we go deeper into that, I hope it's clear to your audience what self leadership is, where you're the one influencing yourself, you're the one leading yourself, you're the one deciding what the outcomes of your desired lifestyle are.
mm. Now, yeah, I'm very sure listeners would have understood. And what I understood from here is it's just we are guiding and leading ourselves. But then I also want to understand, Dr. Freda, what is the driving force here? Because when we are guiding ourselves, then our conscience and then our principles or the belief system we are in, they come into the picture. That's what I believe, understand. So sometimes, it can be confused with self awareness. So, how exactly, does it get differentiated from being self aware or maybe being vulnerable, being accountable to yourself first?
And you're right, Sana. All those are factors of self leadership. Because when you look at self leadership, you're looking at yourself holistically, authentically. And so, to be able to lead yourself, you must first of all know yourself. And to know yourself, it means you're self aware of yourself. But how do we become self aware? That's why most researchers will be talking about emotional intelligence. That's why, and in emotional intelligence, that's why they'll be talking about self awareness, self management, self accountability, authenticity, all those dimensions that go to self. But what if we started with defining who self is? So that when you say, I am leading myself, you first of all know and understand what that means for you. So some people will follow identity definition from the traditional way of defining, starting with your
Mm,
name, starting with your family, starting with your job. But in self leadership, that doesn't matter. What matters is, do you know your thoughts? Do you know your emotions? Do you know your spiritual values? And do you know how to present those variables of yourself to the world and to use them to be the guiding post of your lifestyle? So let's say I want to live a very successful lifestyle. I have to first of all define what success means to me. What if I want to live a healthy life? I have to define what health means to me. What if I want to live a balanced life? I have to define what balance is for me. Because if I am working in another organization full time, and I'm also working on my business, and I'm also working uh, on myself, all those things have to come together to be balanced. Therefore, they have to be integrated to make me become the success that I want. So the definition of all the things I want have to be done by me. If they're outcomes, they have to be defined by me. If they're indicators of success, they have to be defined by me. If they are maybe tools that I need to achieve all that, I have to be the one accessing them. Organizations, on the other hand, give employees resources to work with and tools to ensure that organizational goals are being met. But when the goals are my goals, then I have to be the one who is proactive, who is self directed, who is self determined, and who is very well and clear aware of what I really want. So that's the very best place to start, Sana. What do I really want? How do I define it? What does it look like? And then I go for it.
Um, yeah, I got that. I got that. That's a really, really simple yet so effective explanation about this. And then, so Dr. Feda, when we talk about leadership in the context of business, or a company or an organization, then we are defined by certain principles. We are defined by certain um, values. So and times are changing so rapidly. So these values can be sometimes different in different timelines or maybe context. So when we see the leadership self when we see this from the context of self leadership, do we also try to define our values irrespective of the timeline or the context or the era we are in? Or it can be dynamic, it can change from time to time, or it can be influenced externally as well?
And you're very correct, Sana, because self leadership, you can actually embrace it as a competence, as a skill, as a value. And if you embrace self leadership as a value, then it becomes the foundation within which you define all your other values. And so it is quite a dynamic uh, trait. And so if you decide that I'm going to live my life as a self-led person, so it becomes a competence, a skill, like I said, a personality trait. It also guides your spiritual values, your emotional values, your practical practice, and it helps you reclaim your life from inside out, such that when everybody else is experiencing burnout, you don't experience burnout because you're guided by yourself and by your values of self leadership. And therefore, it has a way of reawakening and remembering not who you are, because that one, the culture will remind you who you are, but reminding you of what you are. And when you focus on what you are, then you realize you are like energy, you're like a vibration, you're like a frequency. All those ones never burn out, they never run out. So it doesn't matter about the context or the timeline, because energy has always existed. It has
Yeah.
always existed with a signature frequency or vibration. And once we discover our own personal frequency or vibration, and then realize we are also like energy, therefore, we become even more powerful because we have realized and tapped into ourselves, that area in ourselves that traditional, well, school or culture doesn't
Mhm.
teach us. And then you start now finding information that will help you understand even more how to live from that place of self knowledge at that level.
Mm. I think one thing definitely I have realized right now, from your explanation is I was really wrong to see self leadership only from the context of our career or our professional achievements. I think the perspective is so larger than only the work or the profession side. I think, this is a very holistic perspective that we have to look at when we talk about self leadership.
And you're correct about it being holistic because,
Yeah.
as you can see, it touches every aspect of our lives. And when you
Mhm.
make it a daily practice, then it influences all the decisions you make. And it also increases your resilience, your courage, how you show up in life. And it also balances your emotions, and you become so emotionally intelligent. And if you look up emotional intelligence, the way it has been presented by people like Goldman, then you
Mhm.
see, oh, wow. Then, if I'm emotionally intelligent, I can achieve more. I can be more resilient. I can make better decisions because I'm self managing. I am self aware. And I am starting to know myself. And now you start looking for tools that can help you do that and become that.
Yep, you're right. You're right, Dr. Freda. Okay, wow. So, Dr. Freda, before diving further deep into self leadership, what exactly were those moments or experiences that brought you into this world of exploring self leadership? I mean, if you can share a bit of your journey to with all of us.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. I am so excited to share my story. I want to first of all tell your audience that I was born in a country that wasn't free. We were still colonized. I was born not free myself. And then I started to notice as I was growing up, even when I was in primary school, that we were rebuilding from nothing with nothing. The country that had colonized us was not even helping us. But one thing that they had opened up and that our government was starting to open up was education. And even girls who weren't allowed to go further in education were now being given the opportunity to go further in education. I was also lucky that my parents said, whoever is interested in that opportunity of education, they will support. And so I decided to embrace education. I had realized when I was, like age 10, how I loved to read. And so I kept reading. And then I did not see any person that I could go to and ask, how do you navigate a world where you have just become free from colonization? You have just been allowed to go to school. We have just been allowed to start using our land. How do you
Mhm.
navigate that? I did not have anybody I could go to because everybody was struggling with that. Everybody was navigating that. But I started to notice in my life, young as I was, that whenever I chose to do something a certain way and believed in it, it worked. And so, with retrospect, I can say that I started becoming self led, especially when I was in high school. There was nobody to guide me on to choose what subjects to study for university because, no, I mean, we were among the first ones who were doing that. And so it was like, okay, I'm going to listen to my heart and I'm going to ask myself, how do I want to show up in the world? And I remembered my parents when they allowed me to go to school. And I said, I'm going to be the best teacher so that others can also have this opportunity that I have had. And whenever I show up, I'm going to be showing up as a pioneer, as a trailblazer. And I'm going to believe in whatever I do because there hasn't been any precedent for me. And so I used that thinking, I used that feeling, I used that rationale, I used that critical thinking to help myself, but to also help others. And after that, many decades later, here I am. I went to do my PhD in organizational leadership, and I decided to focus on self leadership as an area of study. And then I realized it was just helping me reflect on all the things I have done, how far I have come. And it was all because I became self determined, self directed, and self led.
And Doctor Dr. Mainah, being among the first to study in a free country after colonial rule, it is no small feat. I mean, it's such a powerful reminder of what opportunity means when a generation steps into freedom. And when I was listening to your story, I couldn't help but reflect on my country's own journey post independence. Our generations, our parents, our grandparents, they had walked similar paths of reclaiming education, leadership, and identity beyond the colonial system. So it's definitely a shared story across continents. And I think this makes today's conversation about self leadership even more profound.
Thank you so much, Sana. Especially the fact that you said profound. There are times when on our journey, we don't think that what we are doing is profound or what we are saying is profound. Even the work you're doing, according opportunity for some of us who are not seen or heard to come to your podcast and be heard is profound in itself. And I am really, really grateful. And when you're living life day a day at a time, one challenge after the other. You're not thinking about being, profound. You're not thinking about being courageous. You're not thinking about that. You're just thinking about, I just have to get through this day. I just have to get through this course. I just have to get through this semester. I just have to get through whatever it is you're getting through. And so it's a day to day, kind of achievement. By the time it becomes cumulative, you've achieved a lot every day. And so for me, that you called it profound, I am so humbled and honored at the same time that my daily achievements have become cumulative to the extent that you see them as profound. Thank you so much, Sana.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fredah. Ah, lovely, lovely. And since you mentioned those experiences, and then you have also taught across high schools and universities before moving into coaching. Um, what differences or what kind of loopholes, or maybe, I mean, what's your opinion about the schools and universities in today's context? I mean, because we are talking about a newer generation, and that too in the digital age right now, heavily influenced by external validations, whether it's appearance or thought process or whatever you are just saying from your mouth, or writing in there, sharing in there. So do you see a gap in between academic leadership theories and then the practical application, especially at high school and the primary education level, especially about self leadership?
Actually, you're right. And self leadership can actually equip anyone all the way from primary school, secondary school, college, work, life. And
Mm,
what I know is that our education systems have very good information, very good content. However, there is that lack of the practical part of it, the critical thinking part of it. So when I started teaching, I was allowed to teach critical thinking. But then later politics came and it was removed, and we weren't able to do that. Then I came to the US, and again, I had the freedom and I had given myself permission to teach critical thinking, because now these are not high schoolers, these are college students who are going to be the next generation of leaders. And so I taught them critical thinking, and I taught them to solve world problems. And so I would teach content from a practical perspective. And I would teach it as if it was a project that we were managing. And I would put them into groups of whatever world problem they wanted to solve. And that way, I decided it doesn't matter whether our education system has a space for doing that. I'm going to create the space. And having been a self led person, whenever I saw a problem, I did not sit there worrying about the problem. I sat there looking for a solution. And so sometimes I'd even involve my students. One time, I do remember some international students struggling with the pedagogy of the university, which was quite linear. And I talked with them, and then I did my research and I published a paper about a different type of pedagogy that would assist my students learn, much better. And, together we had struggled fitting in. And I had not grown up in an environment where I had to fit in. Now I was struggling with an environment where everybody wants to fit in. And that's what you are speaking to, Sana, where because we all want to be validated, and the validation is based on metrics that are not for personal development, they are for producing employees. So labor economics will clarify that when an economy, whether it is in any country anyway, what they're looking for is to sustain the pipeline for employees. And that's a good goal for a country. But is it a good goal for me? I want to be a good employee, yes. But I also, number one, want to be the best version of myself. And therefore, I have tapped into education for content. I have tapped into education for structure. But when it comes to values, I define them from my self led and self determination context. And therefore, the gap you're talking about is there. But should we sit there worrying about the gap? Look at AI, for instance. AI has come from those kind of gaps that you're talking about. You look at a gap and then jump in and become the pioneer of solving that gap.
That's a very good point made, Dr. Fred. Very well made. Oh, great. So, unfortunately, in the interest of time, Dr. Freda, before we wrap up, if our listeners would like to connect with you and explore how to approach self leadership, how to understand it first, and then embark upon this path to embrace it, to get in deep into self leadership, what's the best way to do that?
Well, if they just type my name on Google, they'll find me. Or on LinkedIn, they'll find me. Social media, just type my name, they'll find me. But the best way is to go to um, maybe my YouTube channel. So again, just my name, Fredah, Mainah, Mainah. Just type my name and they'll be able to find a way that they can connect with me. Whether it is social media, whether it is Instagram, they'll be able to connect with me. LinkedIn, they'll be able to connect with me.
Lovely. I'll have all the links in the show notes for our listeners. And Dr. Freda, thank you so much for bringing this much needed form of leadership. I think, not from the business or professional level, but I think holistic level. And this was really such an enlightening and intellectual discussion. Really, I absolutely enjoyed it. And I'm very sure our listeners will as well. So thank you so much.
I really thank you, Sana, for offering us this kind of platform. Thank you so much as well.
So, listeners, just refer to the show notes along with this episode to connect with Dr. Freda and explore more about self leadership. If you are looking to lead, first yourself with more clarity, courage, and purpose. And also, thank you to all of you for tuning into this episode of BizBlend, where we go beyond the surface of leadership. Stay curious and stay bold.